Revolutionary salutations to the people of Zimbabwe. Comradely greetings to the suffering masses of our people. Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the people's favorite show, the Tete-a-tete, a one-on-one conversation. It's not an interview, it's a one-on-one conversation. Tete-a-tete is a French word, which means one-on-one conversation. On the show, I'm joined by none other than Comrade Ostalos, Gift Ostalos Ziba, a seasoned political scientist, human rights defender, activist, and a thought leader in the field of politics development and the democratic alternative. Comrade Ostalos, welcome to the show and greet the people.
Thank you very much. Greetings, fellow Zimbabweans, fellow Africans, and citizens of the world.
Thank you very much. So let's get straight into the show. The last time we recorded an episode of the show, we focused on politics, focused a bit on the alternative, the democratic developmental state that we were talking about. But interestingly, today I'm holding a copy of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, Comrade Ostalos, because we're going to be making a reference to the supreme law of the land. But in today's episode, we are going to talk about tax justice, equity, and equality. We want to, from a social democratic point of view, we are social democrats ideologically. We want to look at Zimbabwe's tax system. Is it progressive? Is it regressive? Is it serving the interests of the people? And why do we see our country struggling in terms of social service delivery? Yet the people pay taxes and various user fees, direct and indirect taxes. So, Comrade Ostalos, getting straight into the show, what's your general comment on Zimbabwe's tax system and the taxes we pay?
Thank you very much, Brother Mlamba. I think that looking at the tax question in Zimbabwe, in the context of our social democratic persuasion, that the question we must answer as a country is the question of equity, is the question of reducing inequality in our country. And some of us are convinced that to reduce inequality in our country, which is a major issue, and maybe I can speak briefly to that. The inequality index, Zimbabwe is ranking as one of the top countries and equal societies. And it is important that when the government spends money, it looks at intentions and objectives and programs to reduce inequality.
Why are we unequal? Why is you say it is ranked one of the top countries in the world in terms of our Gini coefficient being over 0.6? Why are we this unequal?
The reasons are the following. The reasons are structural. The way we redistribute wealth. So if you look at the wealth redistribution in the country, the top 10% of the country owns 50% of the wealth. The bottom 50 owns about 12% of the wealth in the country. So it's a highly unequal society. So the first thing we have to do is that the government expenditure must also be directed towards reducing inequality, what we call the inequality reduction index.
Okay.
It helps government to spend towards reducing inequality. One, by making sure that public service provision is for the benefit of the poor, by making sure that the tax is just, is fair towards the poor. Because what we want to reduce, Brother Mla, for the benefit of our viewers, is the gap between those who are poor and those that are rich. That is what we call a fair society, a just economy. So when we talk about tax now, if you look at corporate tax in this country, which is our first point of entry, corporate tax in this country is at around 24%. But the average corporate tax across the African continent is at 30% plus. If you look at value-added tax, particularly to the poor, because that is the problem in the country. Taxing, for example, betting. I saw someone who collapsed after putting money in the recent Chelsea. I know you're a Chelsea supporter.
Yeah, of course.
So people lose money, so much money, the poor. If you look at the issue of our social service provision, issues around health provision in the country, the fact that ordinary people are overtaxed, but here is the irony. Tax breaks are given to big corporates. Zimbabwe loses about 51 million a year on people, whether tax avoidance or and so forth.
So are you saying, from what I'm, your argument for an increase in corporate tax, right, is on the basis that we want tax justice?
Precisely.
And by tax justice, we mean corporates should pay more as opposed to
Than
my
taxing the poor.
grandmother in Jolocho
Precisely the
paying
point.
more in VAT. So VAT is currently around 15% in Zimbabwe.
And you look at the taxing goes to basic food.
Yeah.
Why do you overtax low income earners instead of taxing companies like Great Dyke?
But the argument can be made, Comrade Osalos, that no, if you tax companies the more, then there will be capital flight. Because investors or capital wants low taxes so that it invests in the long term. And in the long term, there will be what they call trickle down. When investors have invested in the economy, mining companies, multinational corporations, they create jobs, the economy grows, then the wealth will trickle down to the state.
The argument, Brother Mlambo, is a progressive one.
Okay.
But it goes to the line of the neoliberal approach because we are developmentalists in our approach. What we need to do, that's why we talk about the state playing a regulatory role in the developmental agenda. We must not be persuaded into a private sector-led developmental agenda, which basically introduces more tax break. What we are talking about is having a balance. That's why we talked about an average tax that is in the continent.
Which
that
is 30%
precisely
tax.
the point. So you have to strike the balance, and the state must do so. But also that comes with an obligation to the state, bringing in a conducive environment for investment. For example, now, it takes us back to microeconomic stability, issues around currency, issues around access and movement of money. So it's important, but the state, when it takes this obligation, it does not only end there in tax collection. It comes also with obligations and responsibility upon the state. I'll give you an example. Even the value-added tax, it must come with the state obligation. How much money is spent by the state on health? How much money is spent by the state on education? I'll give you an example, and we can touch on that, of course, when we're looking at the state of education and, of course, the health sector. You realize that figures show that we are below agreed regional, international treaties and threshold in terms of our provision, whereas we are collecting more tax. So,
so where's the tax money going? Is it going to debt servicing? Where's the tax money going?
That's where the error is in the country. That's where corruption comes into play. If you look at the statistics by the current Auditor General's report, if you look at the statistics by Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission, you would see that we lose a lot of money on corruption. So, and that's why we talk about the issue of introducing wealth tax, right? Because most of the people avoid tax. Just recently, there was a war on Twitter where a minister was asked to account for a number of cars that came in. So if you look at how much Zimbra fails to collect on tax, you see, if we remove penalties and other issues, Zimbra does not collect much tax as it's supposed to do. Because people are not paying tax, particularly the wealthy and the political.
So you're calling for the introduction of a proper wealth tax.
Precisely.
On the wealthy.
Precisely.
Won't that scare investors? Won't that scare the wealthy who spend money anyway in the economy? Are you saying we should criminalize being wealthy?
We should not criminalize being wealthy, Brother Mlambo.
Yes.
But we must ensure that the state, the ordinary people, benefit from the wealth because we have accumulated. And this is a cycle. It goes again because if you look at data, it shows that we are not performing well when it comes to labor rights in the country. Because part of this wealth has been primitively accumulated thanks to unregulated labor environment. If you look at the situation at the investors, my lecturers on strike. If you look at all the negotiations, ZCTU provides so much data on that. So you have to strike a balance. It comes with the responsibility on the state. I think that a progressive wealthy individuals know that they must pay to the state, but a state that is responsible, a state that is genuine, a state that is also knows in terms of its responsibility.
I think what you're saying, if you look at the constitution that I'm voting here today, Comrade Dostal, for the first time, the second time on the show, we came with a copy of the constitution, section 298. It's very clear, the burden of taxation must be shared fairly.
Precisely.
So it speaks to what you're saying.
Precisely.
Those who earn more should pay more tax, and the state that collects the revenue treasury in this instance must make sure that that revenue, as the constitution then says in the same section 298, that revenue raised from taxation and any other sources should be used for the development of Zimbabwe.
Precisely.
So progressive taxation, if I'm getting you correctly,
That's very
is about using tax revenue in a country that is highly indebted, number one, which cannot access fresh lines of credit.
Precisely.
So it needs to domestically mobilize the resources through taxation.
Yes.
And a wealth tax
Precisely.
is one example of how a state that is failing to access money internationally because of its indebtedness can generate revenue and take that revenue, invest it in productivity,
Precisely.
invest it in social protection, which is one of the most underfunded sectors in the economy.
This country. Yes.
So that we are clear.
Yes.
Because some people they say, I know these guys are anti-capital.
No.
If on that point, are we anti-capital on the Tete-a-tete?
we are not anti-capital.
Yes.
We believe in developmental capital.
Yeah. Well, what is developmental capital?
Developmental capital, Brother
Yes,
Mlambo,
yes.
is making sure that the resources of the country are for development, not for primitive accumulation by gringo elites. It must be for the benefit of everyone. That's why we talk about a shared economy. That's why we talk about a democratic developmental state anchored on the values of equity. You get the point?
Yeah, I get the
That's
point.
our belief.
Okay.
Our belief is that
Capital
is good in generating wealth.
Yes.
But capital is not good in redistributing wealth.
Herein comes the state.
Herein, the state must come and play a regulatory role between the rich and the poor, so that we create what we call an economy that is for the benefit of the many,
not the few. Jeremy Corbyn.
That is our proposition.
Are you a communist comrade or
we are inspired by the
by Jeremy
Labour
Corbyn?
Party,
Okay,
without a doubt.
But they checked him out of the Labour Party. But anyway, for ideological reasons. So moving on with the show, and in the interest of time, coming back to inequality, comrades, issues to do with inequality. You said we are one of the highly unequal countries in sub-Saharan Africa, and quite frankly in the world. You're making reference to the CPI index on inequality, and we are not doing well. But what are the socioeconomic effects of inequality? They record you, but I understand the constituents you represent. In a part of it is in. You're always talking about the level of poverty. Speak to that. How inequality is beyond statistics. To say no, we're one of the most unequal economies or countries in the world. You have interfaced with inequality as a parliamentarian, as a Zimbabwean, as a human being. How do you see the socioeconomic effects of inequality? And what does it do to what you always call the social contract?
Thank you very much, Brother Mlambo.
Yeah.
Three things manifest itself directly out of the crisis of inequality in this country. First is health. The crisis in our country is that the immediate casualty to this is health, access to health, primary health care in the country. We spend we spend less than the Abuja Declaration on Health, which says 15% of the annual budget must go to health. And because of that, it means that our people die either on their way to hospitals, in hospitals, or before you are involved in an accident. You might die in the spot because of our failed rapid response healthcare systems in the country. Just recently, we saw the city of Harare announcing that its emergency lines are not working.
Yeah.
So it means
that a city of over 2 million people.
Precisely the point. Which in the capital city. So it means that if you're involved in an accident, you might die in a process you could have been saved.
Yeah.
That's not only, we're talking about accident, but there are also other problems. Look at the diseases that are killing our people. 19th century
typhoid, cholera.
So health is the immediate casualty of the inequality in the country, access to health. Our proposition obviously is that the state must provide health. Last time we were talking about the percentage of people that are on funeral cover rather than having health insurance, because people are preparing for death rather than preparing to live.
Yes.
And it affects the entire fabric of society, because our wealth must be our health. Any progressive society that wants to be wealthy must invest in the health of its people.
Yes.
There is a direct correlation between wealth and health.
Yeah.
So Zimbabweans are no longer oriented in investing in their health. So for someone like me who spent 40 years destroying your own body and living in an unhealthy life, when you make the money in an unhealthy environment, you then spend the money that you have made over 40 years trying to solve your health problems.
Yeah.
The second,
in the interest of time.
Challenge is on education. If you look at the people who access education in our country, people clamor that Zimbabwe is one of the highly educated countries. Data disqualifies
That's so true.
that qualitative approach.
Yeah.
It's a hangover of the Zimbabwe post-independence.
Yeah, the 80s.
It's not Zimbabwe we live in today.
I think only 30% pass O level.
In fact,
Zimbabwe.
Brother Mlambo, you know that 1% of the bottom poor, the bottom poor in the country, the 20% quintile in the country, only 1% of them proceed to secondary school after primary education. The entire
So where is the rest going?
They consumed by extreme poverty and unemployment. That's why extreme poverty.
And where are these people? Is it urban or rural?
This is majority now. That is the problem. Traditionally, we used to talk about rural poverty. Now we talk about urban poverty. So these are the Krango consuming young people. But also these are the people that leave the country as economic refugees to go and work.
But comrades, yet we are talking about a 2% tax, value-added tax, betting tax, 3% levy, AIDS levy, fuel tax. Why then should we have people paying school fees?
Ironically, Zimbabwe is a signatory to the Dhaka Agreement, and which is inspired by SDG number 4, that education must be free, basically, because when you spend 20% of the national budget on education, it means that primary education becomes free and accessible. But when you talk about, so how do you reduce poverty? How do you reduce inequality in the country when only 1% of the bottom poor goes to secondary education?
Primary to secondary education.
You get the point. So it's shocking.
But does that happen in Borodale? Children in Borodale?
It won't happen.
In the Grange, in Kumal.
If you want to see the link now, which is the third area of the challenge, is the issue of social protection. Social protection in this country is a problem. Only about 22% of the elderly receive the grants, and those that are made.
And how much are they receiving?
As poor. And these are peanuts. And of the 22% is the same people you are referring to from Borodale, those who have contributed to NASA and so forth. The majority of the people, the elder remains vulnerable. Countries like Sweden are investing in their elderly, because they are growing a population.
So alternatively, as we try to wrap up, what's the link between tax justice, one? Because you said we must pay tax. We are not against paying tax, but it should be fair, as the Constitution says, the burden. So what's the link between tax justice and social protection?
The issue is that when the state collects tax, that's why the question is about stewardship. When the state collects tax, it must be for the benefit of reducing inequality in the country. So when we pay tax as ordinary people, as the poor, as the oppressed, it must then fund education, fund the health. Look at how much money we pay on AIDS levy.
3% of
how much
your aid time.
Precisely, every call that you make, you contribute to the AIDS. Those are millions of dollars. That must go directly to the Ministry of Health.
National AIDS comes with the Ministry of Health.
Precisely the
and
point.
Now Trump has removed funding.
Now, post-USA, there is no funding. Even UK has also reduced its support to the country in terms of.
And we are told as of July.
Precisely the point.
The rates of infections.
It's an opportunity for the state to become responsible. We cannot going to outsource our health solutions to foreigners, particularly the West, because of Zambia's ideological inclination, which is an oxymoron.
Pan-Africanism. It's actually ironic that for a Pan-African party, which has been in government for 45 years, it has been relying on the West.
It continues to say we must look to the West to fund our primary health care.
So I understand what you mean. Social protection, because over 60% of the population, Comrade Osalos, is living in abject poverty. But when you look at a country like China, post Mao Zedong and President Comrade Deng Xiaoping came into
Xiaoping,
power.
yes.
You know, I don't care whether the cat is black or white, so long it catches mice. Essentially, what we are saying, we have to be pragmatic to have socialism with Chinese characteristics
Precisely.
to address the problems we are facing. And inside, what do you know? China at some point was a bit poorer than us.
Precisely.
In the 80s, our per capita income
Precisely.
was higher than that of China. It was a rural economy characterized by peasants. But dang, so it's a question of stewardship on the part of leaders and a vision. It lifted over 300 million people out of poverty inside 35 years. And today, China is if not the largest economy in the world, or the second largest.
In fact, the Chinese growth trajectory start with Mao Zedong.
Okay.
That the first thing you must do is to feed your people.
Yeah.
Ian Smith knew that.
So he created
After being
cold
heated by
storage,
sanctions,
grain marketing board.
after being isolated, after unilateral declaration of independence, this first thing that Ian Smith did was to feed the people. That's why Parliament was occupied by farmers.
Yeah, that's true. And cabinet itself.
Precisely the point. Because his objective was that to deal with questions of inequality, because remember that if we don't resolve these three things, health, access to health, education, and social protection, the danger is that this society is also a society that can suffer from instability politically.
Yeah.
So that's what we want to cure. So Ian Smith knew that to quash possible revolt and instability in the country, I must feed the people. So what we need, Brother Mlambo, and that's why China knew that we need to reduce the inequality gap. That's why right now you go to China. For the reason why companies move to China is because there are so many engineers. That's why it is highly competitive. That's why it's able to compete with the big industries in Washington and New York and Silicon Valley.
Yes.
Because it is a lot of intellectual labor and expertise in one square meter. You know that there are so many engineers.
Thanks to Deng Xiaoping.
You get the point.
Yeah.
So investment in education is not a de-investment. We see some people who don't understand think that we must privatize education.
And some people on X saying, "Chikora china basa."
They don't understand that if you are investing into the future, you must invest in education. Because
But it's the quality of the education.
Precisely the point.
Is it STEM-based?
We are not saying you must fund political science, arts, and so forth. They must be funded, yes, but they're important.
But
a nation without a philosophy can die.
Yeah.
But you must also invest in STEM.
Yes.
Precisely the point if you are worried about the future.
Thank you very much, Comrade Osalos. I would want to give you 5 more minutes, your final parting shots, as you summarize what you're talking about: tax justice, economic justice, fighting inequality. Fighting inequality is a serious matter, because inequality, if not taken care of, it's a ticking time bomb. Your final parting shots in 5 minutes or less.
Thank you very much. I think that Zimbabwe must answer questions of reducing inequality. We must have a program as a country, a national program of reducing inequality. It must be an urgent program led by the state deliberately to ensure that all policies, all government programs, all expenditure of the state must be earmarked towards reducing the inequality gap. That is what we must do. Secondly, we must look at the questions of tax justice in the country, not just locally, but also internationally. Let's go back to the UN Tax Convention. We must also ensure, because we don't exist in isolation, we must also as a country, make sure that we benefit from the Addis expertise on tax. Because the African Union has got the expertise that must help the country for now looking at regional solutions to the question of tax. And obviously, as we propose, some of us are convinced that a wealthy tax is important, but it must be a state that is led by stewards. The politics of the country must be fixed. And I think we've invested conversations on the politics. So that is important, because the state that must collect tax must be an honest state. It must be a transparent state. It must be an accountable state, so that those that pay tax to the country know that they go to roads. As a business person, if you are paying tax, at least you must access your workplace. You must not go to your work via portals. Right now, you see that there are these applications, that in-drive applications that tell you that you are approaching a portal. That must not be the case. So we must ensure that when we pay tax, we must also benefit. And more importantly, we must ensure that our politics is aligned to these realities and global
And how
trends.
should tax work for women in 1 minute?
Of course, it is important because women are the most vulnerable. Those that deal with tax in the country must also wear their gender lens.
Okay.
Policymakers ought to, at all material times, wear their gender lens when they look at issues of tax justice in our country.
Thank you very much, Comrade Osalos. It was a fantastic discussion, a fantastic tete-a-tete. As we have always argued, Comrade Osalos, that this platform is not an interview.
Yes.
But it's a one-on-one conversation where we cross-pollinate ideas, where we try to contribute to the social democratic cause in the country. We are social democrats, as you correctly said. But today we're talking about tax justice, inequality, and the need for social protection in our motherland. Comrade Osalos has furnished us the statistics, scary statistics, disturbing statistics that you shared around the levels of poverty, inequality, and hopelessness that are in our country. But Comrade Salos, recently the Minister of Finance and Economic Development, the Honorable Professor Mthuli Ncube, argued, quoting Zimbabwe statistics, that the GDP is now around 45 billion. Maybe in the next episode of the Tete-a-tete, we'll start from there.
Precisely.
If our GDP is 45 billion US dollars,
we must debunk that myth.
Is it reflective in the pocket of Emi and Ngobizita Mlambo? Do I relate with an economy that is said to be worth 45 billion? Or is just quantitative growth which is not qualitative or quality in nature? Human Development Index.
Yeah.
But fellow citizens, allow me to implore you to like the show, like the episode, subscribe to the channel, share widely. But more importantly, we invite those who disagree with us in the comment section, because we're here to reshape ideas, not necessarily to confront personalities. Better is not good enough. The best is always yet to come. See you in the next episode. Siyabonga.